Hi, welcome to Renee and JJ in the Morning. I'm your host, Renee.
And I'm JJ.
We have a great show for you today. You know the book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison? We're going to talk about how socialism was in the book the entire time.
And we have two special guests coming in, Regina Table and Virginia Mansky.
Basically, they're basically specialists on Invisible Man, and they're going to tell us all about the book. I think they're going to be focusing on the brotherhood. I'm really excited to get this started. We have a special guest for you, and we have to go all the way back to the grave to find him. It's a great show, so stay tuned. So JJ, for our viewers at home who don't know, what exactly is socialism?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, socialism is any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods.
So basically, you're not allowed to own private property in socialism?
Correct. That's what kind of system of government it was. And it really gave African Americans something to be a part of.
So this was at a time when they were feeling unequal to the world, so they wanted better pay, jobs, and a better standard of living?
Right. It started their fire to want this fight for equality, and it was just the first step.
Okay, let's get started. So here we are with our first guest, Virginia Mansky. She's going to enlighten us on Invisible Man and socialism. So, hi Virginia, how are you doing?
I'm good.
So tell me, why did you become so focused on the book Invisible Man?
Well, the literature actually really spoke to me, and it spoke to me so much that I decided to make a career out of it.
Hey, you gotta do what you love, don't you? So Virginia, what do you have for us today?
Well, I actually have a few quotes, and I'm going to tell you all about how African Americans had to deal with socialism and before the time preceding the Harlem Renaissance. And I actually have a quote for you right here with me today from the book.
Okay, so this quote's gonna show us what African Americans felt like before the Harlem Renaissance, right?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is from the second page of the prologue in Invisible Man, and it goes like this. Or again, you often doubt if you really exist. You wonder whether you aren't simply a phantom or in other people's minds. Say, a figure in a nightmare which the sleeper tries with all his strength to destroy. It's when you feel like this and that, out of resentment, you begin to bump people back. And, let me confess, you feel that way most of the time. You ache with the world, need to convince yourself that you do exist in the real world, that you're a part of all the sound and anguish, and you strike out with your fists, you curse and you swear to make them recognize you, and alas, it's seldom successful.
Wow. You can really tell that they felt invisible at the time, just like they didn't matter.
Exactly.
So is that why they joined socialism? Because they wanted to feel like they mattered?
That's exactly one of the reasons, and it's probably the biggest reason.
You know, it's actually really sad because Ellison really shows us how little they felt at the time. And it wasn't right, but just nobody thought against it.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely one of the main points that you bring about with the socialism and how it happened before the Harlem Renaissance and before African Americans became pelted with all of the inequality.
Thanks a lot, Virginia. That was a great quote.
No problem.
All right, so next we have a special guest, Regina Table. It's a pleasure to have you here, Regina.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so what have you brought for us today?
Today I have a quote from the book, and it talks about how the African Americans looked like they were involved in socialism, but really it was just an appeasement to by the socialists for them.
All right, let us hear it.
Okay. So this quote comes from page 142 in chapter 6 of the book. Tell anyone you like, he said. I don't care. I wouldn't raise my little finger to stop you, because I don't owe anyone a thing, son. Who, Negroes? Negroes don't control this school or much of anything else. Haven't you learned even that? No, sir, they don't control this school, nor white folk either. True, they support it, but I control it. Eyes big and black, and I say yes, sir, as loudly as any burrhead when it's convenient. But when I'm still the king down here, I don't care how much it appears otherwise. Power doesn't have to show off. Power is confident, self-assuring, self-starting, and self-stopping, self-warming, and self-justifying. When you have it, you know it. Let the Negro snicker and the crackers laugh. Those are the facts, son. The only ones I even pretend to please are big white folks, and even those I control more than they control me. This is a power setup, son, and I am in the controls. You think about that. When you buck against me, you're bucking against power. Rich white folks' power. The nation's power, which means government power.
All right, so basically it was all just a mask, right? White people made it seem equal on the outside so that they would have the black support, but they were actually all just in charge of it for socialism.
Yes, basically, the socialists were giving the African Americans what they wanted, and they didn't know that African Americans were catching on, and this led to the Harlem Renaissance.
Interesting. So they just, the African Americans at the time wanted to be involved in socialism because they were so ready to fight for equality, but it's actually really sad because they weren't really wanted the whole time.
Right, it was just them kind of, oh yeah, you can participate in
Right.
this.
Great, thanks Virginia. Okay, Virginia, tell us about the next quote you have for us.
All right, so this next quote comes from about the middle of the book of Invisible Man,
Okay.
and it's when the narrator gives his very first speech after he joins the Brotherhood. And so basically what this quote is telling us is that it's demonstrating the struggle between the narrator at the time, which represents the African Americans,
Okay.
and the struggle between him and the Brotherhood, which represents socialism.
Oh.
And basically, when the narrator goes up against the Brotherhood and tries to give a speech in the way that he wants to,
Mm-hmm.
the Brotherhood basically attacks him for what he tried to stand up
And
for
branching
his
out.
beliefs. Exactly. So that is what I'm going to be showing you.
All right, let's hear it.
All right. So this comes from chapter 16 on page 342, and it goes like this. That was all I needed. I'd made a contact, and it was as though his voice was that of them all. I was wound up, nervous. I might have been anyone, might have been trying to speak in a foreign language, for I couldn't remember the correct words and phrases from the pamphlets. I had to fall back upon tradition, and since it was a political meeting, I selected one of the political techniques that I'd heard so often at home, the old down-to-earth, I'm sick and tired of the way they've been treating us approach. I couldn't see them, so I addressed the microphone and the cooperative voice before me.
Interesting. So this quote really shows us that at this time, the socialists really rejected all types of individuality.
Exactly.
They just wanted all to be a group and all to be equal.
And that is what the Invisible Man turns out to be at the end as well.
Interesting.
Yes.
It's really cool how this was all hidden the whole time, but you could really tell that Ellison was trying to make his point.
That's exactly what is going on here, yes.
Very interesting.
So, Regina, what other quotes do you have for us today?
I actually have two right now, and both of them regard the Brotherhood and how it controlled everything that African Americans do. And it shows how socialism would control everything just in general. So the first quote comes from page 473. We do not shape our policies to the mistaken and infantile notions of the man in the street. Our job is not to ask them what they think, but to tell them. And the second quote comes from page 470, and it says, for all of us, the committee does the thinking, for all of us, and you were hired to talk.
All right, I see. So basically, it was showing how individualism was rejected and that the Brotherhood used African Americans as a mouthpiece.
Yes, exactly.
So Virginia, do you have any more quotes to share with us?
I do. So, up to this point, we've been talking about how the narrator has been struggling against the Brotherhood and how the narrator has been African Americans and the Brotherhood is socialism. And so he's been battling against that the whole time.
Right, like it's all been mirroring.
Exactly. And so, since we've talked about that, we're now going to talk about Ralph Ellison and how he is inserting his own point of view into Invisible Man.
I love it.
And so I have a quote here that's
Okay.
very crucial to that. So, this is chapter 16 on page 349, and Brother Jack starts out, Never mind, Brother Jack said, suddenly calm. Just what is the problem, brother? Let's have it out right here. Just what is your complaint? Not a complaint, an opinion. If we are still allowed to express our opinions, the brother with the pipe said.
Wow, you actually can feel the anger if we still are allowed to express our opinion.
Exactly, and that directly is showing a point of socialism and how in the idea of socialism, you're not allowed to have your individuality.
Right.
You're not allowed to express your opinion, and that is what is being inserted into this quote
Right.
here.
Along with, the equality could be great, but along with it comes a lot of harsh feelings because you're not allowed to be yourself.
Exactly, and that is what Ellison is trying to point out here.
Great.
Regina, how did Ralph Ellison get into socialism then?
He became a socialist through his mother, who was in the Socialist Party, but he left the Socialism Party and experimented with Marxism a little bit, but he was involved with it throughout his whole life because he edited his mother's socialist newspaper, so it's throughout his whole life that he dealt with socialism.
So he always kind of had socialist ties.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why he felt socialism was important enough to include in his book.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you too for coming on our show. We really enjoyed having you here. You guys really know your stuff.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, thank you.
Feel free to stick around for our big surprise guest.
We're giving you an exclusive view at Karl Marx's grave. We're going to be summoning him from the dead.
So he can talk to us about the conflict theory and how it applied to socialism. JJ, let's summon Karl Marx. Karl Marx video. baby. Come on, Karl Marx. Come on, anytime.
That was a long nap.
Get in the light, Karl Marx. That was a long nap, though.
That was a long nap.
Do you mind if we take you back to our studio so that the viewers can get an exclusive view on socialism?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yes! Come on,
Karl
guys.
Marx.
Yes, Karl Marx, right here for the first time.
Stay tuned.
Hi, we're here with our special guest who's graciously agreed to come on our show from the grave, the one and only Karl Marx. Karl, how are you
Peace.
doing? Are you kind of stiff from laying around?
Yeah,
Are
I'm a
you
little
stressed?
stiff. Oh.
I see your beard's grown a little bit.
You know what they
Ooh.
say. Once you die, your hair never stops growing.
Oh, Karl, you're so knowledgeable. So
That's what they say.
we were hoping you could tell us about the conflict theory and how it went into socialism and Marxism.
Well, Marxism is basically, have you ever heard of the conflict theory?
I've heard of it, but can you tell us
Okay,
more?
well, it's basically when society is made up of two opposing forces, such as the upper class versus the lower class,
Okay.
the ruling class versus the subject class.
Sure.
All right, well, what is the solution to the conflict theory?
Well, the solution to that is, of course, socialism, whereas everybody would be equal.
Therefore, nobody would be fighting?
Yeah, there'd be no upper class, there'd be no lower class, it'd just be one single class.
Understandable.
Can you tell us a little bit about the African Blood Brotherhood and how this involves everything that we've been talking about?
Well, yeah, the African Blood Brotherhood was founded by Briggs, who I chill with in the underworld. Of course,
Oh,
Cute.
you
Yeah.
guys are friends.
we're a little tight.
So what did he campaign for in the Brotherhood?
He campaigned for what he told me. He campaigned for black jobs, and he mostly focused on like small white shopkeepers.
Like the no more of them, or
Yeah, like he wanted to get rid of them.
Okay. So
All right, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. But didn't he make a journal, right? Correct.
Oh yeah, he created the Crusader in 1918, and
who founded the Messenger? The other
that
socialist
that
journal?
was Chandler Owen and Philip Randall, I believe.
Okay, so they were both socialist journals, and they were basically just about bringing awareness about the Blood Brotherhood fight.
Yeah, like they fought for black equality, which, I mean, that was the big thing back then.
Right, that led to everything.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about Invisible Man still, we could say the Blood Brotherhood. Perhaps that's why Ellison came up with calling it the Brotherhood.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it could be a stretch, but you never really know. Maybe we'll have to go to the grave and get Ellison one time.
I'm down.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on our show, Karl Marx. We'll get you back safely, and we'll bury you up nice.
Oh, thank you very much.
We can also trim your hair if you'd like.
No, it's No Shave November. You gotta remember that.
Of course. Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time with Renee and JJ in the morning.
Peace.
Hi, this is the Renee and JJ recap. We just want to go over everything that we learned today in our episode.
So, mostly, we can talk about how the history is incorporated into Ralph Ellison bringing socialism into the book.
We know that it's there because we can tell that he lived it. He went through being an African American right before the Harlem Renaissance, and he knew the inequalities at the time.
So, although it's not straight out said in the book, you can tell by things that he incorporates, such as the Brotherhood.
Right. He also lived through socialism. He experimented with it, so he knows what he's talking about. Whenever we saw the Brotherhood, we saw the inequalities that the African Americans were going through.
This is such an important factor in the inequality that is represented in the book by the Invisible Man.
Absolutely. Basically, we learned that, yeah, socialism would make everybody equal, and yes, the African Americans joined through it because they needed something to be a part of, but it wasn't as good as it seemed. You weren't allowed to be individual, and you weren't allowed to really make ever up your own mind.
Exactly. So I hope you guys learned a lot about socialism today.
And I hope you enjoyed our episode.
See you next time!
I hope we do.